The clock read 2:42 p.m. when Ben Carter's world shattered. His foot slammed the brake as the sedan ahead spun out of control, crashing into a utility pole with a sound that split the afternoon open. Metal folded, glass exploded, then silence, broken only by the hiss of a dying engine and the smell of gasoline spreading across hot asphalt. Ben sat frozen. Around him, people climbed out with phones raised, recording, backing away. No one moved toward the wreckage. Through the cracked windshield, he saw her, a woman slumped against the driver's seat, blood streaking her face, lips moving soundlessly. "Help me." 2 words shaped by desperation. Behind her, a small hand pressed against the rear window. 2:43 p.m., 17 minutes until the interview that would save his daughter from poverty. 17 minutes to choose. Ben opened his door and ran toward the smoke while everyone else ran away. In that moment, he lost everything he'd fought for. Never knowing the dying woman whose lips formed those silent words held the power to give him his future, or destroy him completely. Ben's hands were steady as he yanked open the driver's door, steadier than they had any right to be with gasoline fumes burning his nostrils and the metal groaning like something alive and dying all at once. The woman's eyes found his, wide and glassy with shock, and her mouth kept forming those same 2 words over and over, no sound coming out, but the shape of them clear as daylight. Her seatbelt had locked across her chest, pinning her against the seat, and when Ben reached across to unbuckle it, his fingers came away slick with blood from a gash on her forehead he hadn't noticed before. "I've got you," he said, though he wasn't sure that was true, wasn't sure of anything except that the smell of gas was getting stronger, and somewhere behind him, a man was shouting about everyone getting back, getting away. That thing's gonna blow. Ben worked the seatbelt free and got his arm around the woman's shoulders, supporting her weight as she tried to stand on legs that wouldn't quite hold her. She grabbed his shirt with surprising strength, her fingers twisted in the fabric, and turned her head toward the back seat with such desperate urgency that Ben followed her gaze without thinking. The little girl couldn't have been more than 5 or 6, strapped into a booster seat, eyes closed, a trickle of blood running from her nose. Ben's stomach dropped. He eased the woman down onto the pavement, ignoring her protests, her hand still reaching for him, for her daughter, and he dove back into the car. The back seat was a mess of shattered glass and twisted metal. The booster seat wedged at an angle that made the buckle nearly impossible to reach. Ben's fingers fumbled with the clasp, once, twice, and on the 3rd try, it clicked open, and the girl slumped forward into his arms, warm and breathing, thank God. Breathing. He carried her out and laid her gently beside her mother, who was sobbing now, real sounds finally breaking through the shock, and she pulled her daughter close with shaking hands while Ben stood there, chest heaving, looking down at them both. The girl's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. And she said, "Mommy?" in a voice so small it made something in Ben's chest crack wide open. Around them, the crowd had pressed closer, phones still raised, and someone said the ambulance was coming. Just a few more minutes. Hang in there. Ben looked at his watch. 2:51 p.m. 9 minutes. He could still make it if he ran every red light between here and Meridian hotels. Could still walk into that conference room with his resume in hand, and his best smile plastered across his face, and pretend his hands weren't shaking. Pretend he couldn't still smell gasoline and blood. But the woman was looking up at him now, tears cutting clean tracks through the dirt on her face, and she reached out and caught his hand, squeezed it hard enough to hurt. "Thank you," she whispered, and her voice was hoarse, wrecked. "Thank you. Thank you. I thought nobody." She couldn't finish, just held onto his hand like it was the only solid thing left in the world, and Ben squeezed back just once before he gently pulled free. "Take care of her," he said, nodding at the little girl. And then he was running back to his truck, his shoes crunching over broken glass, his heart hammering against his ribs. He threw himself into the driver's seat and pulled back onto the road, weaving through the stopped traffic, his hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. The clock ticked forward. 2:53, 2:55, 2:58. By the time he screeched into the parking lot of Meridian Hotels, the clock read 3:28 p.m., and Ben sat there for a long moment, engine still running, staring at the gleaming glass tower in front of him, and knowing, just knowing, that he was too late. The lobby was all marble and gold fixtures, the kind of place that made Ben hyper-aware of the grease stain on his work jacket and the scuff marks on his boots. The receptionist behind the desk looked up as he approached, her expression already shifting from polite interest to cool dismissal as she took in his appearance, the way his hair was sticking up in the back, where he'd run his hands through it too many times, the faint smell of gasoline still clinging to his clothes. "I'm here for the 3 o'clock interview," Ben said, trying to keep his voice steady, professional. "Ben Carter. I know I'm late. I can explain, Mr. Carter." The receptionist's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Your interview slot was at 3 p.m. It's now 3:30. I'm afraid the position has been filled. I understand I'm late, but if I could just speak to someone for a few minutes. There was an accident, a car accident. I had to. Do you have documentation? Police report, hospital records, something official?" Ben stared at her. I wasn't in the accident. I stopped to help someone." "I see." The receptionist's tone made it clear she didn't see or didn't care. "Mr. Carter, Meridian Hotels values punctuality and reliability above all else. We received over 200 applications for this position. The candidate who showed up on time demonstrated those values. The one who didn't, did not. I'm sorry, but there's nothing more I can do for you." Ben wanted to argue, wanted to explain about the woman with blood on her face, and the little girl who'd said, "Mommy," in that tiny, broken voice. Wanted to make this woman understand that some things mattered more than being on time to an interview. But he could see in her eyes that it wouldn't matter, that she'd already made up her mind, already filed him away under unreliable, and moved on to the next name on her list. So he just nodded, turned around, and walked back out into the afternoon sun, which seemed too bright now, too cheerful for the way his chest felt hollow and scraped out. He sat in his truck for a while, not starting the engine, just staring at nothing. Then he pulled out his phone and called his daughter's after-school program to let them know he'd be there to pick her up soon. Lily's voice when she answered was bright and eager, asking if he got the job, if they could go out for ice cream to celebrate. And Ben had to swallow hard before he could say, "Not today. Sweetheart, maybe next time." The next 2 weeks moved like sludge, thick and slow and suffocating. Ben picked up whatever HVAC repair jobs he could find, mostly residential work that paid by the hour, and dried up as autumn settled in and people stopped worrying about their air conditioning. He fixed a furnace for an elderly couple who paid him in cash and homemade cookies. He replaced a compressor for a landlord who tried to short him $20 and acted like he was doing Ben a favor. He drove all over the city in his battered truck, tools rattling in the back, and tried not to think about the number in his bank account that kept creeping lower and lower, despite how hard he worked. Lily noticed. Kids always did, even when you tried to hide it. She stopped asking for things. New shoes when her sneakers got too tight. Art supplies for a school project, the book series all her friends were reading. She started offering to share her lunch with Ben, picking at her sandwich with studied casualness and saying she wasn't really that hungry anyway. It made Ben want to put his fist through a wall, the way she'd learned so young to make herself smaller, to need less, because needing things meant watching your parents' face do that thing where it tried to smile but couldn't quite manage it. One night, Ben was sorting through the mail, bills mostly, all of them stamped with red warnings about past due amounts. when Lily came and sat next to him at the kitchen table. She was wearing her favorite pajamas, the ones with the stars that were getting too short in the sleeves, and she had her math homework spread out in front of her, but she wasn't looking at it. She was looking at Ben, and her expression was too old, too knowing for a 7-year-old. "Dad," she said quietly, "are we going to be okay?" Ben put down the electric bill he'd been staring at without really seeing and pulled Lily into his lap, even though she was getting too big for it, even though his back protested after a day spent crawling around in crawl spaces. "Yeah, baby," he said into her hair, which smelled like the cheap shampoo they bought in bulk. "We're going to be okay. I promise." It was the kind of promise you made even when you weren't sure you could keep it, the kind parents had been making since the beginning of time. Lily nodded against his chest, and Ben held her until her breathing evened out, and she'd almost fallen asleep. And then he carried her to bed and tucked her in and stood in the doorway for a long time, watching her sleep and trying to figure out how he was going to pay rent next month. The answer came 3 days later in the form of a phone call from a number Ben didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer. Too many creditors calling lately. Too many conversations that started with artificial politeness and ended with thinly veiled threats. But something made him pick up on the 4th ring. "Hello? Is this Ben Carter?" A woman's voice, hesitant, slightly rough around the edges. "The man who helped at the accident on Route 12 2 weeks ago." Ben's hand tightened on the phone. "Yeah, that's me." "Oh, thank God." The relief in her voice was palpable, genuine. "I've been trying to find you. The police wouldn't give me your information, privacy laws or whatever. But I got the traffic camera footage and tracked down your license plate, and I'm sorry. I know this sounds creepy. I just really needed to thank you properly. You saved our lives." "You don't need to thank me," Ben said automatically. "I'm just glad you're both okay. Your daughter, Harper, her name's Harper, and she's fine, completely fine, thanks to you. Concussion and some bruising. But the doctors said if she'd been in that car any longer..." The woman's voice cracked, went quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, it was steadier, more controlled. "My name is Rachel. Rachel Hayes. And I know this is probably strange, but I'd really like to meet you in person, to thank you, and to ask you something." They met 2 days later at a coffee shop downtown, the kind of place with exposed brick and overpriced lattes and baristas with elaborate tattoos. Ben got there early, ordered a black coffee he didn't really want, and sat at a table by the window, watching people pass by on the sidewalk outside. When Rachel walked in, he almost didn't recognize her. The woman from the accident had been covered in blood and tears and broken glass. But this woman was put together in a way that spoke of money and power. Her dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, her clothes expensive but understated. She spotted him immediately, though, and her face softened into something grateful and a little overwhelmed. "Ben," she said, sliding into the chair across from him. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "You said you wanted to ask me something." Rachel smiled at his directness. "I did. But first, I need to properly thank you for what you did. The doctor said another 2 minutes and the smoke inhalation would have..." She stopped, shook her head. "You risked your life for strangers. And I need you to know that means something. That it meant everything." Ben shifted in his seat, uncomfortable with the weight of her gratitude. Anyone would have done the same thing. "No," Rachel said firmly. "They wouldn't have. There were 40 people standing there with their phones out, and not one of them moved. Just you." She paused, studying his face. "You look tired." "It's been a long couple of weeks. Because of the interview you missed." It wasn't a question. Rachel's expression shifted, became something sharper, more intent. "I did some research on you too. I hope you don't mind." I found out you were supposed to interview for a position at Meridian Hotels that day, and that you didn't get it because you were late. Because you stopped to help us." Ben's jaw tightened. "That's not your fault." "It's not yours either. But it happened anyway. And now you're struggling because you chose to do the right thing, and that's—" Rachel made a frustrated gesture, like she was trying to catch hold of the right words. "That's not okay. So I want to help. I want to make this right. I don't need charity. It's not charity. It's a debt. One I can actually pay, as it turns out." Rachel leaned forward, her eyes bright with something that looked like determination. "Ben, what if I told you that you could still get that job? That I could make one phone call and get you another interview?" Ben frowned. "How would you—" "Because my father owns the company that owns Meridian Hotels, Hayes Property Group. We're the majority stakeholder." The coffee shop seemed to go very quiet around them, or maybe it was just that Ben's ears were ringing, his brain trying to process what Rachel had just said. The woman he'd pulled from a burning car, the woman whose daughter he'd carried to safety while gas fumes choked the air, was the daughter of Richard Hayes. The Richard Hayes, whose face was on the business section of the newspaper half the time, whose real estate empire stretched across 6 states. "You're—" Ben started, then stopped. "That's a lot, I know." Rachel's smile was wry, self-deprecating. "I don't usually lead with that information. Kind of kills the getting-to-know-you process when people find out your dad could buy and sell them twice over before breakfast. But in this case, it means I can help. My father respects my judgment. If I tell him you deserve another shot at that interview, he'll make it happen." "Why would you do that?" Ben asked, and he heard the suspicion in his own voice. Couldn't quite help it. In his experience, people like Rachel Hayes, people with money and power and connections, didn't just hand out favors to guys like him. There was always a catch, always an angle. Rachel's expression softened. "Because Harper asked about you. She wanted to know if the nice man who saved us was okay, if he had kids of his own, if we could do something to say thank you. And when I found out what happened, what you lost by helping us, She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I realized I had a chance to show my daughter that good things can happen to good people, that doing the right thing doesn't always mean getting punished for it. So, yes, I'm doing this partly for you, but I'm also doing it for her, to prove that the world isn't quite as awful as it sometimes seems." Ben wanted to argue, wanted to say he didn't need anyone's help, that he'd figure it out on his own like he always did. But he thought about Lily and her 2 small pajamas, about the electric bill with its final notice stamp, about the way she'd asked if they were going to be okay, and he'd promised yes even though he wasn't sure. Sometimes pride was a luxury you couldn't afford. "Okay," he said quietly. "If you can do that, if it's not too much trouble, then, yeah. Okay. Thank you." Rachel's smile was genuine, warm. "Don't thank me yet. You still have to nail the interview." 3 days later, Ben got a call from Meridian Hotels. Not the cold receptionist from before, but someone from Human Resources, someone who spoke in professional tones and explained that they'd had a position open up, different from the one he'd originally applied for, actually a step up, more responsibility, and they'd received a very strong recommendation on his behalf. Would he be available to come in for an interview? Say, tomorrow at 2 p.m.? Ben said yes, hung up the phone, and stood in his kitchen for a long moment, staring at nothing, trying to figure out if this was really happening, or if he'd somehow fallen asleep and was dreaming it all. Then Lily came home from school, dumped her backpack by the door, and said, "Dad, what's wrong?" "You look weird?" "I got another interview," Ben said, and his voice sounded strange to his own ears, halfway between disbelief and something that might have been hope. "At Meridian Hotels, tomorrow." Lily squealed and threw her arms around his waist, and Ben held on to her and thought, just for a moment, that maybe Rachel was right. Maybe the world wasn't quite as awful as it sometimes seemed. The interview went well. Better than well, actually. The facilities manager who conducted it was impressed with Ben's experience, asked detailed questions about complex HVAC systems and emergency repairs and regulatory compliance, and seemed to genuinely appreciate the practical knowledge Ben had gained from years of hands-on work. They talked for almost an hour, and when it was over, the manager shook Ben's hand and said he'd be hearing from them soon. Very soon. Ben walked out of the building feeling lighter than he had in weeks, almost allowing himself to believe that this might actually work out, that the nightmare of the past month might finally be ending. He was halfway to his truck when he heard someone call his name. He turned to find a man in an expensive suit striding toward him, late 40s, silver hair, the kind of confident posture that came from never having to worry about money a day in your life. "Mr. Carter, I'm Graham Foster, Director of Human Resources for Meridian Hotels." The man's handshake was firm, his smile professional and completely empty of warmth. "I was hoping I might have a word with you, privately." They ended up in Graham's office on the 14th floor. All glass walls and minimalist furniture, and a view of the city that probably cost more in rent than Ben made in a year. Graham sat behind his desk and gestured for Ben to take the chair across from him, and there was something in his expression that made unease prickle along Ben's spine. "I'll be direct, Mr. Carter," Graham said, folding his hands on the desk. "I know why you're here. I know that Rachel Hayes vouched for you, and I know exactly why she felt compelled to do so. I've reviewed the police report from the accident, spoken to the responding officers, confirmed the timeline. You did indeed help Mrs. Hayes and her daughter, and you did indeed miss your original interview as a result." Ben waited, saying nothing, because he could hear the "but" coming from a mile away. "Here's the situation," Graham continued. "Rachel Hayes is a major stakeholder in this company. Her father founded Hayes Property Group, and she holds significant influence despite not being involved in day-to-day operations. When she makes a request, we listen. However," he paused, his eyes sharp and assessing, "I am the one who actually runs this hotel chain, Mr. Carter. I hire the people. I set the standards. And I don't appreciate anyone, no matter how well connected, attempting to circumvent our normal hiring procedures." "I didn't ask her to do this," Ben said, keeping his voice level. "She offered. I'm aware, which is the only reason we're having this conversation instead of security escorting you out." Graham leaned back in his chair. "I've reviewed your qualifications. You're experienced, knowledgeable, and from what I understand, you performed well in your interview today. Under normal circumstances, you'd be a strong candidate. But these aren't normal circumstances, are they?" "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if I hire you, it will always be because Rachel Hayes made a phone call. Your coworkers will know it. Your supervisors will know it. And every time you make a mistake, every time you're late or mess up or fail to meet expectations, people will assume it's because you're protected, because you have connections, that you don't actually deserve to be here." Graham's smile was thin, sharp. "I've seen it happen before. It breeds resentment. It damages team morale. It makes my job harder." Ben's hands curled into fists on his lap. "So what? You're not going to hire me?" "I didn't say that." Graham pulled out a folder, slid it across the desk. "I'm offering you a choice. You can accept this position with the understanding that your connection to Rachel Hayes remains strictly confidential. You sign a non-disclosure agreement, promising never to reveal how you came to work here, never to leverage your relationship with the Hayes family for any professional advantage, and never to contact Rachel Hayes while you remain employed at Meridian Hotels. You become just another employee, no special treatment, no exceptions. Or," he paused, "you walk away right now, and I'll personally ensure you receive a generous severance package. $50,000 cash, enough to get you through the next few months. Find another position elsewhere." Ben stared at the folder like it was a snake that might bite him. "You want me to pretend I don't know her?" "To cut off contact completely. I want to protect the integrity of this organization. If you're as qualified as you claim, you'll have no problem succeeding on your own merits. If you're not, well, at least Rachel Hayes will never know that her charity case failed." The words hit like a physical blow, designed to humiliate and diminish. Ben looked up at Graham Foster's perfectly composed face and understood, suddenly and completely, that this wasn't about protecting the company or maintaining standards. This was about power. About a man who didn't like being told what to do, even by the people who technically owned the company he ran, and who'd found a way to reassert his control. "You're asking me to lie," Ben said quietly, "to take this job under false pretenses and spend every day looking over my shoulder, wondering if someone's going to find out the truth and use it against me. I'm asking you to earn your place like everyone else, to prove that Ben Carter, the employee, is worth just as much as Ben Carter, the man who saved Rachel Hayes' life." Graham's expression didn't change. "What you did for her was noble, Mr. Carter. Truly. But nobility doesn't pay the bills, does it? And I suspect a man in your position, single father, mounting debts, limited prospects, can't really afford to turn down either of the options I'm offering you." He was right. That was the worst part. Graham Foster was absolutely right. Ben needed this job, or he needed that money. And either way, he needed to swallow his pride and take what was being offered, because Lily was at home right now, probably doing her homework at the kitchen table, probably wearing those too small pajamas, probably trying not to think about whether they'd have enough for groceries this week. He could feel the weight of that responsibility like a physical thing pressing down on his shoulders, making it hard to breathe. Ben stood up slowly, carefully, like he was moving through water. He looked at the folder on the desk, at Graham Foster's expectant face, at the city spread out below them through the glass walls, all those people living their lives completely unaware that up here on the 14th floor, a man was being given a choice between his dignity and his daughter's future. "No," Ben said. Graham's eyebrows rose slightly. "No, I'm not signing your NDA, and I'm not taking your money." Ben's voice was steady now, certain. "You're right that I need this job. You're right that I'm desperate. But my daughter is watching me, learning from me, figuring out what kind of person she wants to be based on what kind of person I am. And I can't, I won't, teach her that it's okay to be afraid of the truth, that it's acceptable to make yourself small and silent so that powerful men feel comfortable. Mr. Carter, Rachel Hayes offered me a second chance because I did the right thing. If I take this position under your conditions, I'd be proving that doing the right thing was stupid, that I should have driven past that accident and shown up on time and climbed over whoever I needed to climb over to get ahead. Is that really the lesson you want me teaching my kid?" Graham's expression had gone cold, shuddered. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe." Ben turned toward the door, then paused and looked back. "But at least it's my mistake. At least I can look my daughter in the eye tonight and tell her that her dad didn't sell himself out for a paycheck." He walked out of Graham Foster's office, through the gleaming lobby, out into the afternoon sun, and he didn't let himself think about what he'd just done until he was sitting in his truck with his hands on the steering wheel and his heart pounding in his chest like it was trying to break free. Then he pulled out his phone and called Rachel Hayes. She answered on the second ring. "Ben? How did it go?" "I need to tell you something," Ben said, and then he told her everything. The interview, Graham Foster, the NDA, the choice he'd been given, and the choice he'd made. When he finished, there was silence on the other end of the line, and for a horrible moment Ben thought she might be angry. Might think he'd thrown away the opportunity she'd worked to create for him. Then Rachel said very quietly, "That son of a bitch." "I'm sorry," Ben started, but Rachel cut him off. "Don't you dare apologize. Graham had no right to do that, no authority to make those demands. He works for my father, not the other way around, and he seems to have forgotten that." Her voice had gone sharp, dangerous in a way Ben hadn't heard before. "I'm going to call my father right now. This isn't over." "Rachel, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. Harper asked me yesterday if the nice man was happy now, if helping us made his life better, and I told her yes, because I wanted to believe it. But if I let Graham Foster get away with this, I'll be teaching my daughter the same lesson you refused to teach yours, that powerful people can do whatever they want, and the rest of us just have to accept it." She paused. "Give me 24 hours. Don't make any other plans. Can you do that?" Ben didn't know what to say, so he just said, "Okay." The call came not from Rachel, but from Richard Hayes himself, 20 hours later. The voice on the other end of the line was gruff, businesslike, with an edge of something that might have been amusement. "Mr. Carter? This is Richard Hayes. I understand you met my daughter under rather dramatic circumstances." "Yes, sir." "And I understand you turned down a job offer from Graham Foster because you didn't like the strings attached." "That's correct." There was a pause, the sound of paper shuffling. "I also understand that you scored a 95 on our technical competency assessment, highest score we've seen in 5 years. Graham was required to administer it after Rachel and I had a rather pointed conversation about hiring practices and the difference between nepotism and gratitude." Ben's heart lurched. "I didn't know there was a test." "Graham didn't tell you." "Interesting. Well, you passed it anyway, which suggests to me that Rachel's faith in you wasn't misplaced." Another pause. "Mr. Carter, I built my company on the principle that competent people deserve opportunities, regardless of how they come to our attention. My daughter vouched for you. You proved yourself through formal assessment, and you demonstrated integrity when offered a compromising situation. As far as I'm concerned, that makes you exactly the kind of employee we need." "Sir, I don't understand. The position is yours if you want it. Graham Foster has been reassigned to our Las Vegas property, effective immediately. The new HR director will be reaching out to you within the hour to discuss terms. No NDAs, no secret conditions, just a standard employment contract. Are you interested?" Ben closed his eyes, feeling something hot and tight unwind in his chest. Yes, sir. I'm very interested." "Good. Welcome to Meridian Hotels, Mr. Carter. Don't make me regret this." The line went dead. Ben sat there for a long moment, phone still pressed to his ear, trying to process what had just happened. Then Lily burst through the front door, home from school, and she took one look at his face and said, "Dad? What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, baby." Ben pulled her into a hug, held her tight. "Everything's right. Everything's going to be okay." 6 months later, Ben stood in the maintenance control room of Meridian Hotels, reviewing the quarterly reports with his team. He'd implemented a new preventive maintenance system that had reduced emergency repair calls by 40% and saved the company over $200,000. The facilities manager had mentioned, casually, that corporate was impressed, that there might be opportunities for advancement if Ben was interested. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Rachel Hayes walked into the lobby with Harper, both of them dressed for some function or another, and Harper spotted Ben checking one of the HVAC panels near the elevators. The little girl broke away from her mother and ran over, face bright with recognition. "It's you," Harper said. "The nice man." Ben smiled, crouching down to her level. "Hey there, how've you been?" "Good. Mommy says you work here now. Are you happy?" The question was so earnest, so genuinely concerned, that Ben felt something catch in his throat. "Yeah," he said softly. "Yeah, I'm happy." Rachel had caught up by then, slightly out of breath, and she and Ben exchanged a look that held months of complicated history. Gratitude, and guilt, and something like friendship. "Harper's been asking to see you," Rachel said. "I thought maybe we could all get coffee sometime. You and your daughter, me and Harper. No business, no favors. Just people who know each other, spending time together." Ben thought about it, about Lily and Harper playing together while he and Rachel talked about ordinary things. About building something that wasn't based on debt or obligation, but just on mutual respect and the strange bond formed when lives intersect in moments of crisis. "I'd like that," he said. Later, after Rachel and Harper had left, Ben's supervisor found him in the mechanical room, double-checking the pressure readings on the boiler system. "Got a minute, Carter?" "Sure, what's up?" "Just wanted to let you know that Graham Foster called from Vegas, asked how you were working out." The supervisor's expression was neutral, carefully so. "I told him you were one of the best hires we'd made in years, that you earned your place here fair and square." Ben felt something settle in his chest, solid and sure. "What did he say?" "Nothing. Just hung up." The supervisor clapped him on the shoulder. "Keep up the good work." That night, when Ben tucked Lily into bed, new pajamas now, ones that actually fit, she looked up at him with sleepy eyes and said, "Dad, I'm proud of you." "Yeah? Why's that?" "Because you're happy. And because you did the right thing, even when it was hard." Ben kissed her forehead, smoothed her hair back. "You know what? I'm proud of you too. I didn't do anything." "You did everything," Ben said quietly. "You're the reason I keep trying to be better. You're the reason any of it matters." Lily smiled, eyes already drifting closed, and Ben sat there in the dark for a while, listening to her breathe, thinking about choices and consequences, and the strange, winding path that led from a moment of crisis on a highway to this quiet room, this peaceful child, this life they'd built together. Sometimes doing the right thing cost you everything. And sometimes, if you were lucky, it gave you back more than you'd lost. The trick was having the courage to choose it anyway, even when you couldn't see what waited on the other side.